In this update, we've got a very strange weather pattern developing and somewhat unusual for November. So let's start off and take a look at the Jetstream, show you what we're talking about. You can see the southern branch of the Jetstream has actually dipped well south, actually down there into the Gulf of Mexico and into the Atlantic. That's where all the actual precipitation is. And you see this dry slot that is formed in the middle of the country. That is what's called a zonal flow or a split flow, and that's a very dry flow, shuts the atmosphere down, while the polar jet is somewhat active just along the coastal communities of the Pacific Northwest, complements of these several systems that are coming off the Aleutian Islands. That's going to be impacting those coastal areas around the Pacific Northwest. But other than that, the trough is lifted well north as well up into Canada, bottling up that colder air and lifting all the instability further north into Canada. So we are going through a fairly unusual type setup for the next 5 to 7 days. So I'm pretty excited because I now have my own weather app. You can actually find it on both devices, both Apple and Android. And you can literally have POW in a pocket. So to download it, just go to the store. You can actually have this convenient link that I'll have it in the description below that you can click on it and download it on your phone today. And if you hadn't subscribed to the channel, please do so. I do daily updates on this channel, and it's also important to hit the like button. It gets this information out to many more and shows YouTube you value my content. So let's take a look at the setup going forward. And wow, there's the trough right here. You got the trough retreating back there up into Canada. That's the blue line. That's essentially your freezing line. So that bottles up any of that colder air and pushing it back up into Canada. And then you just have that persistent kind of zonal flow really in the middle of the country. And that's a drier flow and a warmer flow. And that's exactly what we're going to have, at least for the next, about 5 to 7 days for your work week into your weekend work week ahead. So you can actually see that on the precipitation, the precipitable waterfront, all the area that are highlighted in the brown, that is kind of just drier air, and all that any deep tropical moisture is well south into Mexico, down there in the Gulf of Mexico, into the Caribbean, well out in the Atlantic. So there's the steady stream of moisture that will be impacting those coastal areas of the Pacific Northwest. We're talking Seattle into Portland there, about down into portions of Northern California. But notice the dry slot once it gets into the middle of the country, as that atmosphere kind of dries up and it's more or less confined to those coastal areas. But yes, it's pretty unusual because we're essentially into the second half of severe weather season. This is typically when we're talking about big time storms. In fact, just this last year, I was looking at, we had a lot of severe weather across a good part of Texas and across the Southeast, and we're just not seeing that. This is typically what you see for November the 3rd, as have a higher probability of severe storms and tornadoes within this region across the southern plains and the southeast. But a very unusual setup this year, and it's pretty quiet on the severe weather front, which is a good thing. And you can see the zonal flow. I mean, it's pretty evident, right? You got this, you got all this brown shaded area. That is your drier air, and your moist air is further north. It's really, again, confined to the coastal areas up there into the Pacific Northwest, and really up there far extreme portions of New England. But the high pressure is literally dominating for a good part of the country and has all that sinking air and the drier air coming in. And the longer that drier air, the zonal flow and the southwest flow kicks in, the chances are we heat up in a big way. I mean, look at that paint bomb over a good part of the middle of the country. By the time we head into that Tuesday timeframe, November the 7th, temperatures heat up in a big way. Remember, just this last week, we were talking about an Arctic blast coming out, and that's essentially what happened. It just took out so much energy in the atmosphere, kind of cleansed the atmosphere, cleared it out, and now the atmosphere is somewhat what they call recovering mode. and we're heating up in a big way, and there's no cold fronts to speak of. So the longer that south wind blows, the higher probabilities we keep continuing to heat up. So yeah, those areas are well into the 80s across this region, into Texas, into Oklahoma. We could be even approaching 90 at some of these places. And even as far north as Illinois, we're talking into the 70s. And it might even heat up even further on Wednesday. Wednesday could be your kind of max out day at a lot of these areas, seeing potentially some record heat. We were talking about potentially record lows last week. Now we're talking about record heat that could unfold onto your Tuesday into your Wednesday time frame. So we've got plenty of warmer weather to talk about, and look at some of these temperatures, heading into your Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. I mean, wow, 76 degrees for Illinois. We just had some snow showers just the other day in Chicago. Now we're talking 40 degrees warmer. That's a rapid change in the weather department. And look at those 90s starting to show up on the map, and there in West Texas. And even further north, I mean, look at the Dakotas in the 50s. That's plenty warm for them. So yes, plenty warmer weather with that zonal flow on the way. And like I mentioned, Wednesday could kind of be your max out day. We're got almost in the middle 90s down there in South Texas. Brownsville, McAllen, Del Rio, those areas could be middle 90s, 95 degrees. That's crazy stuff for November the 9th, right? So yes, plenty of warm weather on the way, but we do see some changes on the backside. But look at the dryness, folks. I mean, the zonal flow is going to be alive and well between now and Wednesday. I mean, this is kind of really rare. I mean, November is fairly a wet month. I mean, for a lot of these areas, and you've got almost 30 states begging to buy a drop of rain over multiple days. That's just very unusual for this time of year. Again, it's more just confined across the coastal areas of the Pacific Northwest and far extreme portions of New England heading up into Canada. Everybody else is going to be on the dry side for the next 5 to 6 days, heading to at least that Wednesday time frame. And things are going to be changing, right? So we'll have to actually watch all the way up into the Aleutian Islands. We'll have another system starting to develop, and I think this is the one that's just going to be kind of a game changer to kind of break up this pattern, right? So right now we're kind of like in activation mode. We're elevating the atmosphere, heating up the atmosphere, and then once you have that lift mechanism coming in, that's when the atmosphere is going to be overturning, and we're going to produce and probably bring in some severe weather back likely, and a lot of the rain, especially across the middle of the country, and even colder air comes in on the backside. So by Wednesday timeframe, while everything else is starting to continue to heat up, all the action will be looking up there towards Alaska into the Aleutian Islands area. That's the same system that we're going to be talking about that's going to be diving southbound. So as this dives southbound, we're going to have a little shortwave come in across the Ohio Valley as well as into the Northeast here. That's going to be dragging down that trough and bringing down some of that colder temperatures from Canada and dropping it into arterial regions of the Ohio Valley into the mid-Atlantic as well as into the Northeast, while we'll be watching that trough come in and diving from the Aleutian Islands, now going to be entering portions of California. But underneath that, it is going to be a little bit cold enough, especially in our southern Canada regions, are going to be seeing some snow showers underneath that lift mechanism. Well, to the north again, we'll have a first initial cold front come through, but for a lot of these areas, I think it's going to be on the drier side. We'll have to wait for that trough to come in from the Aleutian Islands. That will be diving from, into California by then. But look at the severe weather front, guys. I mean, there's nothing going on for next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So this is a great thing. We might not even be talking about severe weather until next weekend with that system likely coming in. So let's break down that detail. So going into that Friday, Saturday time frame, we'll be watching two areas of concern. We'll be watching this system that's going to be entering a good part of California, heading into Arizona. That is going to be the lift mechanism. So you got plenty of warm air out ahead of that system. And then there's the atmosphere. All this bottled up, deep tropical type moisture will be bottled up down there in the Gulf of Mexico. And with this trough heading in out west, that's going to be providing the lift mechanism to produce showers and thunderstorms across a good part of New Mexico, back into Texas here, back into Oklahoma, likely into Kansas by then, as we'll have that trough come down in from southern, Quebec region into Ontario, diving southbound, and that's going to put opportunities for some snow showers back in the picture in portions of New England. So here's your precipitable waterfront heading into the weekend. So as that trough sneaks in closer into the West Coast, it's going to provide that lift coming in, taking advantage of all that little tropical moisture that's just been bottled up, waiting on some sort of trigger to lift that moisture northward. And that trough is going to be the mechanism to do so. And so by the time we head into Saturday and Sunday timeframe, we've got that steady surge of moisture going to be lifting in from the Gulf and spreading it over a good part of Texas, over Oklahoma, into Kansas, back into portions of Nebraska, into portions of the Southeast by then, back into the Florida region. So on the surface, Matt, you can kind of see what we're talking about, right? It's going to be a little bit cold enough where that vorticity is, where that low pressure is, to be able to wring out some snow showers, especially into the higher elevations in a good part of Arizona, into New Mexico, back into Colorado again. And then it's going to be all rain back into Texas, across Oklahoma, through Kansas, through Nebraska here, as it will be cold enough. Look at the 540 line dipping all the way down into Ohio here with the 1032 high pressure just to the south of there. To the north, yeah, you're going to be wringing out some snow showers across upstate New York, into Vermont and New Hampshire, and back into portions of Maine again. And the rain just gets a little bit more intense as that low pressure gets a little bit closer, likely gets more intense for that Sunday time frame. That 11th and 12th time frame looks pretty wet across the deep south and the southern plains here. And that's exactly why the Climate Prediction Center has highlighted this area of above average precipitation from the November the 11th timeframe, as that we'll have that tropical surge come in by then across a good part of Texas, and that will extend all the way through Missouri into Iowa, as well as into portions of Illinois. And then once that system pulls out of that kind of those snow showers, it'll be drying out across a good part of New England and parts of the Northeast. Further to the south, right, you still have that deep tropical moisture for Florida. And then, yes, it will continue to be on the wet side for the interior regions up there into the Northwest, and drier conditions continue to take place across the Southwest. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video and definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch my next update while I protect you for and after the storm.